Great. Thank you, Anthony. Well, it's my pleasure to end off day one with a conversation with Frank Giustra. He's been described as a Renaissance man, a brilliant businessman and philanthropist. He's also been described as a billionaire, but he disputes that label.
Not true.
See, I told you. Because he gives away too much of his wealth to qualify as such. He's responsible for building multiple successful mining companies, building Yorkton Securities into a mining investment banking powerhouse, and founding Lionsgate Entertainment, the biggest independent film studio in the world. He is currently president and CEO of Fiore Group, and he is heavily involved in several philanthropic ventures, and also serves as co-chair of the International Crisis Group. Welcome, Frank.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
So we're going to, as Anthony alluded to, we're going to start off the conversation by talking about geopolitics and macroeconomics, because there are huge shifts taking place right now that everyone is trying to make sense of. And you've spent a lot of time and energy studying this and writing about it. So I just wanted to know, your interest kind of predates what happened last year with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So what got you interested in this topic initially?
Mainly because I was a student of history. I love reading about history, both geopolitical history and economic history. Just a subject that fascinates me, has for well over 20 years. And I'm always of the belief that if you understand history, you understand what's happening, somewhat what's happening today. There are certainly a lot of patterns that tend to repeat themselves over and over throughout the centuries. And I think we're going through a very transitional period at the moment that I think investors have to be absolutely concerned with and knowledgeable about. And I think if you're not, as an investor, if you're not watching the shifting geopolitical landscape, if you're not watching the macroeconomic events that are taking place, it's like trying to navigate your way out of the eye of a hurricane, because there's so much going on. We're living in unprecedented times, and you have to look at things like the rise of the BRICS, China and the BRICS, and what their ambitions are geopolitically and economically. You have to look at what's happening with the dysfunction of the political system in the United States. You have to look at central bank behavior and the mismanagement of fiat currencies. You have to look at all of these things. The rise, what's happening in the Middle East, the incredible shifts taking place in the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia and Iran now normalizing relations, with now this new Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which is going to possibly draw Israel and the U.S. into some sort of conflict with Iran, because there's a lot of finger-pointing taking place. So those are all necessary. You have to have a knowledge of what's going on, because asset classes will behave differently under different circumstances. Whether it's a stock, a bond, a commodity, real estate, they all have different behavioral patterns depending what's going on at a macro level.
So let's start with a couple of things that you mentioned. We're in officially, I think now, period of deglobalization and moving into a multipolar world instead of a unipolar world dominated by the United States fiscal and military might. So in this situation, the status of the US dollar as the world's unquestioned reserve currency is being challenged. How likely do you think the dollar is to be usurped from its current role?
I think there's no doubt that eventually it will. I don't think there's any doubt in that, for a whole host of reasons which I can get into. The timing and how it actually unfolds, that's who knows. I mean, so many ways this can go. But you have to look at what's happening with the mechanisms by which the rest of the world is trying to get out of the US dollar system. And there's all sorts of conversations taking place. And I don't know which way it's going to go, but I can give you a whole laundry list of possibilities. So there's the possibility of a BRICS currency, a BRICS plus currency. Because As you know, BRICS has now 6 new members, and I think another 17 or 19 applicants wanting to join. It's really becoming an organization. A lot of people don't know, but BRICS have many, many subcommittees that meet about 160 times a year. It's like this is a real coalition that's coming together. So it could be a BRICS-backed currency. It could be a BRICS-backed currency with gold. It could be a yuan, gold-backed yuan, which is entirely possible, and I have my own theories about what China is doing with respect to its gold purchases. It could be a central bank digital currency that does just, which is only used for cross-border trade between countries. And I don't know if you've heard of the M-Bridge project, which is China, Thailand, and the UAE, but they've been testing this for well over a year now to test the use of a central bank digital currency for settlement purposes, which is entirely outside of the US dollar system. It could be a central bank digital currency backed by gold or commodities. That's another conversation that's been taking place. So there are many, and also what is actually taking place as we speak, and you see a new one announced every day, are these bilateral trade agreements using only local currencies. And you, like whether it's France and China, or Brazil and Argentina and China, or whether it's South Korea and Indonesia, or Malaysia and India, they're all establishing these mechanisms by which they can trade just losing between each other using their local currencies. And you've got African nations and South American nations urging everyone to use local currencies for trade and dumping the US dollar. And the entire reason is to get out of the system where the US dollar is the middleman in transactions between countries. So that's going to happen regardless. So it's a question of how long is it going to take? So if it's a slow chipping away at the value of the US dollar, it could take 5, 10, 15, 20 years. If the BRICS nations decide they want to set up a new currency for trade and settlement purposes only, not to be confused with a reserve currency. Okay, people get very confused about how that's going to work, but we're talking about mechanisms by which you settle trading. And so all of these things are taking place. And if there's the introduction of a BRICS currency, or the yuan is introduced as a gold-backed currency, for instance, then you will see a more rapid devaluation of the US dollar against other currencies. So it's going to happen. What the US does about it, well, that's a whole other issue. And I've been saying for a long time now, and for a long time, no one was taking it seriously, that this would be very detrimental to US national security. The US has had the supreme currency now since the end of World War II. It has given it tremendous advantage to run up huge deficits, use an overvalued dollar to buy assets worldwide. It's kept interest rates low, inflation low, and standard of living high. And if you take away that privilege, especially now with the fiscal situation that's happening with the US debt, it would, I think, be a devastating blow. So I'm one that believes that you're going to get a reaction. And you're already seeing the beginnings of a reaction to all this conversation about getting de-dollarization. And the US, you can just tell by the way the US media is now finally waking up to the fact that this conversation is real. And so they're in the same breath, they're warning and dismissing the idea. And I can give you a whole bunch of things that I've read lately, which are just shows you either how naive some of these journalists are, or how complicit they are in trying to poo-poo something that is happening. But so the war of the narrative has begun. That's on the communication side. But then on the countering China, because it's China that's actually creating this movement, convincing countries to de-dollarize. Obviously, Russia is doing it also, but China has more economic power, and it's attracting a lot of dance partners. So I think, and so the reaction is, as I've said, what's the U.S. going to do? They'll use sticks and carrots to either cajole nations from not de-dollarizing. And what are the sticks? The sticks are, well, as they threatened Turkey and the UAE when they weren't playing along with the sanctions against Russia, they said, well, we'll exclude you from G7 markets. With other countries, they'll say, well, say Saudi Arabia, we'll take away your security guarantees. So that's the sticks. Then the carrots are quite amusing, because they've only happened very recently, and it's an answer to China's rise and China's creation of the BRICS New Development Bank, which is competing with the World Bank. It has about $600 billion available to do what the World Bank does. China has currency swap arrangements with 40 countries. The U.S. has 5. And this allows for, during liquidity events to provide currency on currency swaps. It's got something called a contingent reserve arrangement, which is also an arrangement to act like the IMF. And it's obviously got the Belt and Road Initiative. And so what's the U.S. doing? They're urging to put more money into the World Bank to be more lenient towards infrastructure build-outs in the developing world. They're creating they've announced their own Belt and Road Initiative from India through the Middle East into Europe. And then they just recently announced one in Africa that they're going to help fund with this infrastructure fund between Angola, the DRC, and Zambia. So they're doing all of these things to try, and they're competing. But this is a competition between the U.S. and China. And I'm seeing that most of the world, when you look at the Global South or the BRICS nations, they only look to their own self-interest. They don't have really any ideological beliefs, whether it's about the Russian invasion of Ukraine or what have you. They just want to get out of under the foot of this U.S. dollar system because it's costing them a lot of money. The cost to service sovereign debt that's denominated in U.S. dollars is very expensive, especially with rates going through the roof now. The U.S. is exporting its inflation to these other countries because commodities are all priced in U.S. dollars. So you've got 80% of the world that's going, you know what? We wouldn't mind a change. And this is what's happening. And the U.S. is going to have, it's going to have a challenging time to try and prevent this from happening. I don't think in the long run they can stop it. I think they will try and get in the way of it. They had a conversation with India just before that summit in South Africa between the BRICS, and then India came and said, "Oh, we don't want a BRICS currency." So there was a conversation that took place there. So I think you're going to see it's going to be very chaotic, and it might not settle out for a decade or two, or it could happen in the next 5 years, but it's happening.
What are the implications for commodities and for gold in particular?
With respect to?
With respect to everything.
De-dollarization?
All of this disruption?
Yeah. Well, commodities, okay, so you have to separate commodity. Gold is a commodity, but there's, the traditional commodities, and then you have gold, which is a monetary asset also. With commodities, there's also a rush by China to create relationships to secure commodities for the long term. And you've seen it with respect to China and Iran with their comprehensive strategic partnership. You've seen it with respect to China and Saudi Arabia and the GCC countries with their all-encompassing energy cooperation agreement. You've seen it with the special friendship between Russia and China, all these things that they label. And what China's doing is securing its long-term commodity needs by having these arrangements. So I think you're going to see a world where there's going to be a lot of competition for supplies of commodities, oil, metals, food. And, with the Russia war, with the Ukraine, a lot of that stuff comes from there. So that's going to be problematic to begin with. But I think it's also going to be that China will try and secure its own relationships to secure long-term contracts and provide an exchange of, instead of what the U.S. has done for years, which is oil for arms, especially with respect to the Middle East, now it's oil for development. So China wants oil, and it's buying huge amounts from countries that are sanctioned by the U.S., Venezuela, Russia, Iran, and it's getting it at a discount. And is securing long-term contracts, and in turn to deaccumulate the yuans that go for because they want that oil paid for in yuans, they're investing in infrastructure and other exports of technology and other equipment to those countries to keep a balance. And so I think the U.S. is suddenly waking up to that fact also. I know I've had calls from U.S. representatives urging people like myself and others that can raise lots of money to develop projects to come and take a much closer look at Africa. And I've got my own reasons why I would or wouldn't do that. But I can see I've been approached twice, two different parts, and I can see what they're trying to do now. And they're trying to encourage Western investors to secure the development of these projects worldwide in South America and in Africa and other places. And so there's going to be a battle. And I think what that means is commodity prices will go up. With respect to gold, I think that I think we're going to see a reset in the global monetary system. That's absolutely going to happen. Again, I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I have a sneaking suspicion that gold's going to play a role. Why else would, for the last 13 years, central banks around the world, the non-West central banks, have been accumulating gold and now at an accelerating pace? They're de-dollarizing and they're buying gold. And, you know, last year broke a record. We're back on, I just saw the numbers from the World Gold Council this morning. It looks like August and September, they're back at it again. You know, and they all take turns, you know. Recently it's India and Poland, you know. Last month it was Singapore and, you know, and Brazil, or Singapore and Turkey, or Singapore and Egypt, sorry. And, you know, but they're all slowly de-dollarizing and accumulating gold. And there has to be a purpose to it. Secondly, I believe that China has a lot more gold than it's declared, a lot more. And the reason I believe that is just by looking at the numbers. They're the world's largest gold producer. They're the world's largest gold importer. They don't allow the export of buying gold outside of China. 46,000 tons of physical gold has moved from the west to the east since 1995. And China's had a habit of reporting for a number of years, then they stop reporting. And then when they report again, they got a lot more gold. And they just recently, just last year, started reporting again. And my guess is there's a lot of gold stuffed in a lot of Chinese institutions, government institutions. And when there's a need to declare their true gold holdings, they will. And my guess is that there's a lot of conversation taking place about either a gold-backed currency or a commodity and gold-backed currencies. I don't buy the commodity idea because commodity is be too awkward, and I don't know how you would back a currency with commodities. There are, for instance, 70 different grades of oil out there. Oil is not fungible. It's not all the same. And so my guess is gold is already a tier one monetary asset with all such central banks. Why not gold? And, you know, the argument will be, well, you know, there's not enough gold. You know, you can't do it in today's monetary system, not enough gold. Well, then you don't know history, because gold, if you have enough of it and you are in a control position of owning more gold than anybody else, then you can revalue gold, basically devalue your currency, and revalue gold to a different price if you control the pricing, and create more credit and reserves. And that's been discussed even by European countries lately. But I suspect that, you know, the U.S. has 8,100 tons of gold. Europe collectively has more gold than the U.S. The BRICS plus that are about 7,000 tons now, and they keep buying it, and there are more applicants wanting to come into the BRICS countries. And my belief that China has more gold than it's declaring. So I think at some point they will use gold, much like, and to reprice gold, once you have control of the pricing. The U.S. did it in 1933. First, they confiscated everybody's gold. And then the minute they confiscated it all, they repriced it by 65%, in effectively screwing their own people. Did it again in 1971. You know, when, you know, Charles de Gaulle and all these others were trying to take their gold, exchange their dollars for gold. You know, Nixon closes the window and goes, you thought your gold was there, all of a sudden smoke is gone. And so I think that at some point, when the pricing control moves from west to east, when the Shanghai Gold Exchange finally has control of pricing, and it will happen, then that's when you'll see maybe gold playing a role.
So buy gold?
Yeah. Or gold mining companies.
Just to speak specifically about the mining sector, what are the opportunities and risks that you see in this changing environment? I mean, we've heard that it's difficult to get financing, especially on the junior side, but do you have any advice for companies either on the junior side or on the producing side?
Oh, maybe like Tony Morrow, maybe look to heaven and pray, because it is very hard for junior mining companies. Listen, and I feel badly for the junior miners that can't raise capital, because the sentiment is simply not there. The market doesn't care about this sector at the moment. That will change, but at the moment it's tough. You know, got a friend of mine here. We've been doing this for 40, 45 years, and I've seen lots of bull markets, lots of bear markets, and lots of quiet time. And that's sentiment, and then things change, and they change, and then all of a sudden it might happen gradually, or suddenly you're going to get the floodgates open up, and there will be an interest. But to me, there's so much value in the marketplace with gold miners and developers, certain developers. I can speak to exploration separately, but certainly for developers and miners, there's so much value out there right now, and there's zero sentiments by generalist investors. They just don't care. In the West here, we're focused on other things, tech stocks, crypto, and whatever. It's in the East that people are buying the gold, and investing in gold mines. You got China running around the world, buying up gold mines like crazy. And I think we here in the West have been asleep at the switch here, and that's going to have to change. My guess, it'll only change when gold reaches a new level and stays there, a new high and stays there. And then, then I think we'll get some action. But right now, it's tough out there. Now, the flip side is if you are a buyer, if you're someone that has access to capital and likes the sector, I've never seen an opportunity like this. I mean, it's like being a kid in a candy store. You can go out there and just pick off incredible value, and all you have to do is be patient, because it's there. I can name several companies. I won't, but I can name several companies where I see their free cash flow and the profit margins and the multiples to their cash flows. I'm going, this is nuts. This is crazy. I mean, and the life of their mines, and the grades, and you go, there's incredible value there, but nobody cares. But that will change.
So you recently started to invest in exploration, I think for not the first time, maybe.
First time in a very, very long time.
So you put some money into Black Wolf Copper and Gold, which has projects in Alaska. So what prompted you to change your mind about exploration?
I've had a formula that's worked for me to build gold mining companies. I'm on my fifth one right now in the last 22, 23 years.
Sorry, that's Aris Mining.
No, it's Aris is fourth. West Red Lake is fifth.
Okay.
But there was Gold Corp, Endeavor Mining, Leia Gold, Aris, and now West Red Lake. I'm employing the same strategy in every one of them. It's a buy and build strategy, which means you have to have expertise in capital markets, expertise in M&A. You have to have great operating teams. You have to understand political relations. You have to understand community relations. But at the end of the day, it's about buying and building. And it's worked for me, okay? And I'm not saying that it's a formula for everybody, but it worked for me. So I have the attitude, if it ain't broke, why fix it, okay? And so that's been fun. But recently, I've restaffed my office in Vancouver. We have a few dozen geologists and engineers, and they're all young and great and enthusiastic and want to get rich, and I love it, because for me it's okay. Now I've got a tremendous amount of deal flow coming in, and we can pick and choose what we like and what we don't like, and it's fun. And on the exploration side, the truth is, if you look at guys like Lucas Lundin or Robert Friedland, they got very rich at the end of a drill bit. That's, so that worked for them. So you can become incredibly wealthy, do really well, create great shareholder value at the end of a drill bit. But it's got a lot of risk. So I always avoided it. But recently I'm going, well, you know what? At my age, With this group of guys around me that seem to really know what they're doing and can identify great exploration opportunities, sure, I'll sit at the craps table for, until I make a few big scores or until I get severely spanked. But, why not? In my position, I can, put a certain amount of money into something and make it work. And if it goes to zero, it's not going to hurt me. But with Black Wolf, listen, we don't have assays yet. It might be another 2 weeks before we get assays, but we drilled 2 properties up, one on the Alaska side of the border, one on the British Columbia side of the border in the Golden Triangle. And boy, they sure look good, but without the assays, you don't realize. So it's a bit of a crapshoot. I think that maybe we'll make a discovery, and if we don't, we don't. But I think there's a great opportunity to make a discovery, and wouldn't that be fun? For me, that's just a lot of fun.
So I want to ask you about the diversity of your business ventures, because you've had success in such a wide variety of businesses over your career: finance, mining, movies, more recently olive oil. So what's the common denominator behind businesses that are so different?
Passion. Simply. I only do things I love. And I have ADD, so I like to do a lot. I'm curious. I like to learn about a lot of things. And I like to build. And for me, it's an adventure. And sometimes it's really hard, and sometimes it's easier. Bill, you mentioned Lionsgate. Lionsgate was not easy. It took 3 years of my life where I lost a lot of sleep and used to lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, going, "What the hell have I done?" And I had to rescue that from almost going bankrupt before we got everything in place and made it work. So it's not always fun, but it is always challenging. No matter what you do, even olive oil is challenging. I can't seem to find a way to make money with olive oil, but I have the best olive oil in the world, but I can't make money out of it. But I'm just curious, and I'm very passionate, and I love to learn. I love to build, and I love working with people around me that are enthusiastic. And we have a great office now in Vancouver that's just, it's a lot of fun. I wasn't going to work a lot. I was working from home a lot, and now I like going to the office. There are people there, and it's fun. And I love seeing young people, enthusiastic young people, learn and do well.
Can you tell me us a little bit more about how you select people to work with and how you build teams that have been so successful?
Well, I like working. It's the old thing. Work with the devil, And so I've worked with similar people over many deals, and so I know them. I know they're good. We don't always agree on things. We actually often disagree on a lot of things, but they're professionals. They've succeeded. They know what not to do. You can always figure out how to be successful, but you know how not to do something stupid and go broke. And that's a very important lesson that I think most people should learn. I like tough-minded mining guys that are no-nonsense people and just get the job done. So I like, for me, meeting a new person and backing a new person that I don't know and throwing a lot of money their way, it's a bit of a risk, right? So, I've done it, but, sometimes it doesn't work. So I just go back to all of, and over the years, we used to have Yorkton Securities back in the 80s, and so I've been in this a long time. And you get to meet a lot of people. So, when you're thinking about, well, who can I call on this? And, you know who they are. And they've been around a long time. So, you have a great network. And so, I'm lucky that I can pick and choose because I don't take it that seriously. I don't need this industry to have a life. I do it because I love it. And so I have the freedom to pick and choose.
I want to ask you a little bit about your philanthropic ventures as well, because you're involved with a lot of philanthropies, and you target difficult to solve complex problems: poverty, international conflict, refugee settlement among them. So what attracts you to a philanthropic cause, and how do you gauge success in that venue?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you say, I'm involved in I have 4 different foundations doing different things around the world. And for me, it's always looking for a very difficult, complex problem and trying to figure out a new model that will address that problem or at least mitigate it, and where you can do something at scale, where with the funds that you dedicate to it create tremendous benefit. So it has to be something that's very scalable, a new model, something where you can measure the metrics and say whether you succeeded or failed, or you have to tweak it. And so I've done that with the poverty alleviation model, which I launched in 2007. And it took us 7 years and a lot of my money to figure out a model that worked, that would be not only scalable, but transferable to other countries. And that's my farmer services model, which has worked really, really well. And we're attracting a lot of outside capital now, including the US government. And with refugee resettlement, it started out by building refugee centers in places like Greece and Turkey, and then bringing in a certain number of, financing the bringing of refugees into Canada. And then we came up with, it wasn't me that came up with it, it was actually George Soros who came up with it, and he invited me in it, and was to take Canada's model of refugee resettlement, which has been working very well for the last 40 years, which is a model of private sponsorship, where community groups and individuals can sponsor refugees and assimilate them into the communities, and it works really, really well, as opposed to the way that refugees are usually invited into countries, especially some countries in Europe, where you create these ghettos of people from certain countries. And so we decided to take that model and export it around the world and educate countries around the world. We've already got 27 countries around the world that are adopting in various ways the Canadian model and so it was doing something at scale as opposed to trying to just save a few refugees at a time. It was looking at it from a different perspective. The conflict resolution stuff, that's where I spend most of my time. Crisis group, I've been with them for 18 years. I just became chairman about 3 years ago. And we have analysts all over the world. We talk to all sides of conflict. We try and talk to all sides of conflict. And we try and create policies that, recommendations that we can then advocate to the various players that need to be targeted to try and find a peaceful solution to an existing conflict or to a brewing conflict. And I love it because it's geopolitics, it's understanding history, and it's about saving lives. It's we can't stop all wars. Obviously, look what's happening now. It's the last week, but we certainly have played a role in creating peace agreements. And I can give you a few examples. In Colombia, we helped the Colombian government under President Santos to negotiate with the FARC on the peace settlement, which was a 50-year guerrilla war. We've prevented a massive assault on the capital city of Yemen a few years back when it was being prepared by the UAE, which would have caused what was already a devastating humanitarian situation into something that would be unbelievably bad. We were part of the original negotiations with the Iran nuclear deal in 2013. We helped bring the parties together, with some ideas of this. That's the same nuclear deal that Trump killed in 2017. And then they're trying to put it all back together again. It's a never-ending job. But you know what? It's interesting, and someone has to do it.
Anthony, can you tell me how much time we have?
You should have a timer right
6 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay, so we may have some time for questions.
there. That's definitely enough time.
Yeah, but I just want to end with one more question for you. I referred to in your introduction that you've been referred to as a billionaire many times, and you dispute that. You famously donated or pledged $100 million of your own money plus half of your future income to your philanthropic ventures.
Just one.
Oh, okay, that was the Clinton.
That was the poverty
Accesso,
one.
okay. To Accesso, and that was in 2007. So, and you've said that
I've gone through that 100 million.
You've gone through the 100 million, okay. For the record. You've said that you don't believe there should be billionaires. So can you tell us a bit more about your philosophy there?
Yeah, listen, and I mean that at the extreme sense, that you have, in today's world, too many multi-billionaires, okay? And the wealth gap between the rich and poor is getting very, very wide, and it's causing issues, social issues, political issues, all of these sort of populist movements that you're seeing in various places, because people are afraid, they're angry, they're just dissatisfied, they don't understand why they're not able to get ahead in life, and that causes problems. So I'm very much against the wealth gap. I think, listen, I'm a free enterpriser, okay? I believe, you work hard, you make money, great, good for you, that's awesome. What I don't think is healthy is that you have multi-billionaires and you have the rest, they're with a 0.1%. And then you got, billions of people that are struggling to stay ahead of the game. And that those people, some of those people, and I shouldn't say all of them, there are many great philanthropic billionaires, but they don't do it. They just want to build their wealth and they don't care about society. I think it's a very dangerous development. And I think if you understand history, when you get huge disparity in countries, that's when you get problems. And you get revolutions, or you get populist movements, you get all sorts of demagogue behavior, and we're seeing it. You're starting to see it now, and that's just, to me, that's terrible. So from my perspective, and I spend a lot of time trying to tell other billionaires I know what I believe, and some listen, some don't. But from my perspective, what am I going to do with $1 billion? No, seriously. What are you going to do with $1 billion once you have it? And I once asked people to do this exercise. I said, okay, pretend you have $1 billion. Sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and start spending it. Buy a house, a mansion, buy a second house, third house, a yacht, a plane, your art, your jewelry, your whatever, and put a bunch in trust for your children, and see how much you can spend of that $1 billion. And you won't get very far, and you'll still have a lot left over. So I always think, good for you for making billions of dollars. Live a great life and make sure your children, your grandchildren are taken care of, whatever. But for God's sake, you have a bunch there that should be used, as Andrew Carnegie once said, for the betterment of society. And so that's my belief. I don't need $1 billion. I have a very comfortable life. I've given away a lot of money over the years. And I still live a great life, and my children will be just fine. I don't want to spoil them either. And, I just think it's unnecessary.
With that, I guess we'll open it up to questions.
Let me come on up. I think there was a good movie about trying to spend $1 billion with Richard Pryor, right? Brewster's Millions, if anyone remembers that. It is trickier than people think. I'm with you on that, Frank. Okay, we have one over here. Please, go ahead.
I don't need $1 billion. You say that you think that China basically will go to gold standards. Is that correct?
I'm saying that's a possibility. I don't know. I'm guessing. I'm seeing all of the clues. I'm trying to connect dots, and I'm saying that's a very strong possibility.
But if you look at the next kind of stage, don't you think that it's moving back in terms of developing the way we exchange value, going back to gold? Can we not have a different system of value exchange rather than buy gold?
Yeah, perhaps. And like I said, the other approach is to, and it scares me somewhat because I don't like the idea of central bank digital currencies for reasons of too much government control over people's wallets. But if you think at it from the trade perspective, that could in itself create a system of digital currencies, uses trade settlement, more effective, cheaper, and faster than the current banking system the way it works. So, and that's being worked on, and that may happen. But I think from a geopolitical standpoint, I think if China wants to dominate, which every rising power wants to have its turn, they may want to do something either through BRICS or through the yuan that gives them power. And to do that, almost every currency ever invented had gold backing in the beginning. They usually lose their discipline somewhere along the line, but to get the credibility, so I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. My guess is there's a reason why all this gold is being purchased continuously and accelerating. So it's just a guess.
I'd like to follow along on that, though, Frank. Why isn't the U.S., so it's a strong thesis and there's a lot of merit to it, and it does look like Shanghai will get control of that pricing. But the U.S. can see this. The U.S. has been sitting at about 8,000 tons for how long? Why isn't the U.S. buying more gold? Is there theories around that?
I don't know. And I don't know why Canada doesn't own gold. I mean, where the UK sold most of its gold. I think, honestly, I don't give as much credit to policymakers as most people do. I don't think they're as brilliant and have as much foresight as people think. And certainly I've seen that in both, the economic side with respect to central banks and with the geopolitical side with respect to, foreign policy. So I don't know. I don't put much credibility behind it.
They just might not get it.
I think that they're waking up now, and they will do their best to put roadblocks in front of any move towards de-dollarization. They're scrambling now. You can see it in their behavior. You can see it in the way that the media is portraying it, the Western media, I should say. And so I just, you would hope that the new global monetary system, whatever that looks like, because one has to happen, because there's too much debt, there's too much printed money now. It's a mess. You have to reset. So wouldn't it be nice if that were done by consensus, much like it was done with the Bretton Woods Agreement, where everybody gets together and sits down and said, this is going to be the new monetary system, and this is how it's going to be structured, instead of what I believe will happen, which is going to be a huge competition.
Yeah. That's where the signs are pointing right now, unfortunately. Do we have another question for Frank in the audience before we wrap up? Here we go. Right there, please.
Thank you. I thought this day was very and hearing from someone who has mining business but not fully mining, I think it's also helpful. So I think a lot of times mining companies, no matter what stage of what they are, they're always in struggle. They're always in survival mode. Not enough capital, we misunderstood. The public doesn't understand us, and it's like you can't create when you're in survival mode. And it sounds like whether you are a billionaire or not, you'd still be giving back. Always, I feel like even if you didn't have money, you'd find a way, like, to bring positivity to people around. So, and mining has that capital, whether it's little or not enough, but misunderstood. And there is a fear of going out there and doing stuff outside of, this is my SG program, this is sustainability, now I'm going to help women a little bit, but not really like from the heart. That's more like mind thing. This is what we have to do, this is regulation. If you had to give this inspirational talk, no matter how much you have, no matter how afraid you are, like, do something, what would that be?
No matter how much you have?
Like in terms
Of wealth. Yeah, no, listen, I get asked that a lot. And I'll give you, listen, you don't need money to help people. You really don't. So 27 years ago, I started an organization in my hometown of Vancouver called the Boys Club Network. And it was about mentoring teenage boys at risk, that were at risk of going, off the rails. And we started with one school. And every year I put a little bit of money into it, and we slowly built it to a province-wide initiative. And we get a lot of people coming in. I've got a lot of celebrities and business titans to come and speak to the kids and motivate them. Because what those kids need is motivation. They need inspiration and motivation. And if they hear your personal story, because I came from nothing. I came from a very poor background, and I had to work to make my money. And there are a lot of stories like that, like a lot of stories. So I try and bring in those kind of people. And it's amazing what simple words can do, and it doesn't require money. It's more about, and these kids, kids, I mean, some of them are in their 40s now, and they still stay in touch with me, that I said one thing, probably something I don't even remember saying in one of the talks, that they took away and went, oh my God, I want to change my life. I can do it, because that's what I leave them with. I say, you can do it, and you have to believe in yourself. And you work hard, but the first step is believing in yourself. So that doesn't cost any money. It's all, and that's what I say to all the people that ask to come in and mentor. I say, it's going to cost you an hour of your time. And they love it. They come in and they just absolutely love it. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that question. Okay, one last one, but we are out of time. But one last one at the back, please.
Yeah. No, so I speak a lot at these types of events. I love, as you can tell, I love speaking. So I've had a lot of conversations with young people. Listen, here's the problem. The path I took way back that allowed me to succeed, that's not available today. You know, it was my path at a different time with different circumstances. So I can't say to young people, do what I did, because it's probably not going to work. But the world is like changing all the time, and there's always opportunity. Certainly, if you speak about mining, I think that this industry, I'm talking mining base metals and battery metals and precious metals, I think we're going to go into a probably decade-long or longer secular bull market in these commodities because of what I just talked about how the world is fragmenting and how it's going to be a huge competition, and there'll be nationalizations of controlling certain commodities. It's going to get ugly out there, I think. And I think that this is going to be a time where the mining industry is going to be very, very active, and there will be a lot of capital coming in when the sentiment changes. So I think that the industry offers great opportunity for young people. And like I said earlier, in my office, we have, well, compared to me, young people coming in, and I love it. There's a young lady in this room that's in our office. She's an amazing geologist, really hardworking, smart, and hungry. And you know what? We're going to groom her for a C-suite job eventually in her own company, because I see the talent. I see Catherine McLeod sitting there. Catherine worked with me back in the 1980s at Yorkton Securities as an assistant. Next thing you know, she was managing our Chile office, and because of that, she partnered with David Lowy, and became fabulously successful, and I'm very proud of you, Catherine. So I love young people, and I think that they're the future, and I think this industry offers a lot of opportunity.
Amazing. Well, let me say, Frank, from me to you, really feels like you're back 2 feet in the mining industry and now in the exploration game. It's amazing to have you back. You are a sage of the industry. You are an inspiring leader. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world to us. Thank you for the great questions, Alisha. Really well done. Thank you both.
By the way, I was standing out in the hall, and this young lady from Guatemala comes up to me and gives me this book. And said, this is a gift for you, and it's a children's book, and it's called Anna's Adventures at the Mine. And it's a children's book to inspire young people to go into mining, and I think it's really a great thing. So whoever gave it to me, thank you.
From Anna, yes. And Anna will be here again tomorrow out at the front.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Alisha.